have two massive pet peeves. One, my guitar playing being stuck on the previous level. And two, YouTube videos starting off like this. Oh hey, didn't see you there. That's my number one pet peeve. The worst way to start a video out. Hey, didn't see you there. It's the dumbest thing in the world. I don't want to go on for too much because I want to talk about taking your guitar to the next level and leaving that stupid previous level behind. So what we're going to do today is going to sound like this. Okay, so it may sound kind of simple or maybe it sounds complicated to you, but what we're doing is we're taking a few different techniques from stuff we've talked about before and combining them into something that kind of gets this cool back and forth, almost sounds like two guitars playing at the same time, because I think this is like a next level thing when I first was able to comprehend how to do this, because I'm just using a little bit of scale stuff into a little bit of chord stuff and making it sound more impressive and just more interesting and more fun to play, okay? So I'll do it again real slow, but I want to talk more about all the theory and stuff behind this. So here's what it sounds like again. Okay, so we have like a bass line over a chord. First of all, rocking the Dangelico Mini DC into the Supro Black Magick Reverb, and really it's just got the reverb on it from there, so that's the whole signal chain. Again, this is just an A major chord. That's all. You can just, anytime you see an A on a chord chart, you can play something like this. What we're doing is we're taking the A major chord, but breaking it down, kind of spreading it out. You know, I don't know if this is technically a spread triad. Some people have used that term before. But the main part of what I'm doing here is A being the root note of what I'm playing, the 5th fret on the low E string. And then I have the major third, which is what makes this chord major, with my ring finger on the 6th fret of the D string, and my middle finger has the 5th of the chord, being the 5th fret on the B string, right? So 5E, 6G, and 5B. There's my root note, my major third, and my 5th. Okay, so I've fulfilled the requirements of what I need for a major chord, okay? Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a bass line that is accompanied by this chord, all right? So again, I can just play the chord together like that, or I can start to add some other bass notes that will help kind of like have this little playful thing that you have around the chord. The chord isn't changing, but the bass note is. So where do those other notes, those bass notes, come from? They come from the scale that we're using, all right? So we're gonna use the A major scale to accompany an A major chord. Makes a lot of sense, right? But there's some techniques that go into this to make it sound better and a little less messy, a little tighter, okay? So the A major scale looks just like this. Starting on the 5th fret of low E string, middle, pinky, 5-7, A string, pointer, middle, pinky, 4-5-7, and then the D string, which we're not really going to get into for this video, but to continue the scale, 4-6-7, okay? If any of this is over your head, check out my Patreon, because I just do things in much slower detail and everything is ordered sequentially. And also there is a companion lesson on how to do this with other chords in the key on my Patreon. Check that out in the link below. But we're starting with the root note and then grabbing the rest of the chord, just breaking the rest of the chord into just these two notes on the G and the B string, okay? So, simple enough. We're just gonna hit the root note and then grab the chords. You can do the same thing with the pick. It doesn't have to be a fingerstyle lesson. But I think it kind of makes a little more sense talking about a fingerstyle when you first start out, because the palm muting is an important part of this technique, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm palm muting the E and the A string, but the rest of my hand is letting the rest of the strings sustain, okay? So all that has to do is where you rest your palm, and really I'm just getting the A and the D string. See how that's muted? But by the time I get to the D string, then that's actually opened and sustained, okay? So it's really just kind of like backing off into the bridge and then just having the E and the A muted and the rest of the chord can be sustained, all right? So if I'm using my pointer finger and my middle finger to grab the rest of the chords, you can tell that I'm getting tone and sustain from that instead of having my whole palm be on there. Now you can totally palm mute the whole thing like that. It sounds fine, but I think it's a good thing to try to open up the high end of the chord and mute the bass notes, because then you'll get more of like a bass high end type vibe going, right? So what we're gonna do is we've got the root note, and then on the 3, hit the chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we have 2 counts of 4, they're alternating between. Let's just talk about the root and the chord, and then we'll talk about the walking bass line next. All right? So on the first bar, the 1 has the bass note, and the 3 has the chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? The second bar, the root, or the next bass note, is going to be on the 1, and the chord is going to be on the 2. So if we don't move the bass note, it'll sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Root, chord. Okay? So at its core, that's going to be the pulse that is driving everything. Now what we can do is have what's kind of considered a walking bass line, maybe, where we're adding another bass note on the 4 of every bar, which is going to lead us into the downbeat of the next bar. And that's where that kind of playful 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. See how I'm kind of getting like little walking lines at the back end of those bars? All I'm doing is taking notes from the major scale and playing them around these chords with my available fingers, right? So we can go through the entire major scale and then play that chord in between. In fact, that's really good practice to do. So like root, chord, bass, chord, bass, chord, bass, chord, bass, chord. We can keep going to the D string if you want to. Right? I think it's kind of important to be able to maybe play positions and shapes with different fingers that maybe you wouldn't do in like an exercise, right? Whether you're playing 3 notes per string or something like that, or just kind of like this hand shape that I demonstrated at the beginning. Because so much of where you put a note and how you voice a chord is going to be contextual of the song that you're playing in and how you're actually coming about it, right? So you'll notice that I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's take just the first couple of bars, right? You'll see that I hit the root note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, okay? Now, the nice thing about this A major chord is I can actually grab the open A string to help me out, okay? So I'm gonna have that open A string be on that 4 of that first bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, see how that worked? Root to chord, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so again, loading the back end of that bar with either the bass note that you just played or maybe the bass note that is in the scale between the next bass note is a great way to kind of push something or add some movement to a chord without actually even changing the chord, right? We're just playing the notes in A major and we're accompanying an A major chord with it, but it sounds like there's actually a lot of movement and it almost sounds like 2 instruments, like maybe the bass is getting one part and then, you know, the guitar chord is playing another thing. That's why it's kind of cool to separate the palm muted style from the bass notes to the open sustained-ish chords from the high end, right? And when I say sustained-ish is because a lot of times I'm muting it with my fretting hand. See, I'm going, I'm just kind of coming off of there, right? So what on the surface seems like kind of like a simple lesson, really there's a lot of different techniques to go into sounding how I'm playing it. Again, you don't have to play how I play it, play however you want, but just know that there are different techniques available to you within the same chord. All right, so bass 2, 3, A, the next one. So you'll notice that I'm kind of chasing the bass line around. A, C sharp, C sharp, D, D, E, E, G sharp, A, okay? So that's just the bass line. And then again, I'm just adding that chord in on either the 3 count of the first bar or the 2 count of the second bar. Okay, so when you break it down real slow, it's actually not as hard. It can be confusing if you're just trying to just jump right into it, but that's why it's important to think of it as a scale just happening in order or from the back end up, okay? So what I mean by that is, like, let's take that last part. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There, right? So after I get to that D, after D in the A major scale, A, B, C sharp, D, E, we have an E, and then we can just use an open E to do that, right? So I'm getting open 4, 5, right? So that can be a 3, 4, 1 count on that last bar. Hopefully it's not confusing because it's really the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I think being able to just count it like that with some kind of musical dynamic is important to be able to play the whole thing, right? So A chord, A major third chord, C sharp D, chord D, E chord E, G sharp A, chord. Okay, so that's just on a major chord. You can do that pretty much over any one chord in any key. You can even mess around and just play around with different major chords in the key, like the next chord, the next major chord in the key of A would be a D, right? And then E, and then you can just use this shape instead of a full-on bar chord shape to kind of create that separation, right? So if nothing else, just think of this as being the root note, the major third, and the fifth, and be able to that's just a D chord, switching between a D and an E in the bass, right? We can do the same thing for a minor chord. So let's quickly just do the next chord in the key of A. That would be B minor. All right, so B minor would be the 7th fret on the low E string. You could bar it and then get the 9th fret on the A and the D string. But why would you do that when you can actually just kind of take that shortcut like we did before, where we have the root note here, B, and then now it's just G and B share the same fret, 7th fret. There is the requirement to make a B minor chord. Okay, so we do the same thing. Now I'm just changing the bass notes to what the same notes in that key, but the ones that correspond with its spot in there. Again, if that doesn't make any sense, if you've never heard of like a B and then it's minor third being down a string, back 2 frets, definitely check out the Patreon because I go in a lot more detail about that. But we're just going to assume that you know this is a root note, and then the next note in a B minor chord is a D, which is the 5th fret. So now we just get the root. Okay, see how I did that? I just climbed through the scale in more of a minor way to get the root note of B minor, its minor third. We could grab the E because we know that that note is in the key, and then grab its 5th, which is F sharp. B, D, F sharp, right? That's great to know your arpeggios because they're really going to help you in so many more ways than just shredding arpeggios or whatever. The bass note running bass lines is a great way to think about this, right? So we've got A. You can play that twice. B. So again, those are just 2 chords in one key. That's just A to B minor, and it sounds great. Do this in any key. You could mess around in the people's key, the key of G. Just make the G chord right here. have to think about is those open strings and if they're in the key or not. But honestly, even if it's not in the key, if you're just hanging there for a second, like for instance, let's take right? Maybe that doesn't have the same vibe as far as it being in the key, but since you're just kind of like creating movement into a chord, having an open E note in a key that doesn't have E in it isn't going to be the end of the world. So definitely try that out yourself. Make sure to really focus on getting different tone from the bass notes and the chord, because I just think it has a cool sound to it. And then check out the Patreon. And if you have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comment section, Instagram, Twitter, the website. I'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks a lot.